Kathy sat rigidly in the window seat, her light pink shirt clinging slightly to her back from the cold sweat gathering there. The dark pink skirt she had carefully ironed that morning now wrinkled under her tight grip on her backpack. Her breaths came shallow, quick, the kind that were supposed to calm her, but instead made her vision blur at the edges. Outside the window, sunlight reflected off the wing of the plane, too bright, too sharp, reminding her of everything she feared might go wrong. Metal, speed, sky, altitude, every concept pressed against her chest. She tried to read the safety card for the third time, but her hands shook too much to keep it steady, and the text swam under her unfocused eyes. The boarding aisle erupted with bursts of conversation, rolling suitcase wheels, and the hollow slam of overhead bins. Each sound made Kathy flinch. The air smelled faintly of recycled coffee and the lemon-scented wipes someone had used across the aisle. She pulled her backpack closer, almost curling around it, as if hiding could make the rising panic invisible. She whispered silently to herself, counting numbers she hoped would steady her heartbeat. 4 in, 4 out. Her fingers twitched. Her throat tightened. She told herself she could do this. One flight, one window, one chance to prove she wasn't trapped by fear. Then a shadow blocked the light from the aisle. A heavy presence leaned closer, carrying the faint perfume of something intensely floral. Kathy froze. The woman towering over her wore an orange blouse tucked into sharp orange pants, a coordinated outfit that would have been cheerful if not for the hard edge in her stance. Black sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Her expression carried the unmistakable tension of someone accustomed to getting her way. Without softening her voice, she jabbed a finger toward Kathy's seat. "That's my seat. You need to move. Now." Kathy's breath caught, and she blinked up at the woman, startled, words knotting in her throat. She felt the familiar, dreadful heat of panic return. The aisle had been loud before, but the woman's voice sliced through everything, demanding attention. Kathy swallowed, desperate to make her voice work. I'm sorry," she finally managed. "This is seat 14A. It's what's on my ticket. I really need the window. I'm not a good flyer, and—" The woman cut her off with a sharp, dismissive wave, leaning closer until Kathy's shoulders pressed against the cold wall of the cabin. "Sweetheart," I said, "move. I need this seat. My husband is 2 rows back, and I want this window. You'll be fine somewhere else." Passengers nearby turned their heads, drawn by the escalating tension. Kathy shrank into herself, cheeks flushing, feeling the eyes of strangers on her. She wished she could disappear, melt through the floor, anything to avoid the humiliation forming like a knot in her chest. Her breaths shortened again. She clutched the backpack so tightly her knuckles whitened. The woman didn't wait for a response. She simply kept talking, voice rising with exaggerated frustration. "Unbelievable. First-time travelers always make things complicated. Just get up. It's not that serious." A movement from the aisle seat caught Kathy's attention. The man sitting there, who she had hardly noticed amid her anxiety, straightened slightly. He looked to be in his late 30s, calm in a way that contrasted sharply with the woman's intensity. His dark hair was neatly kept, his posture relaxed but attentive. Something in his gaze was steady, grounded, the kind of presence that made noise soften around him. He watched the exchange for a moment longer, then turned fully toward them. "Ma'am," he said, voice level but carrying a firmness that cut through the tension. "She's already in her assigned seat. You need to stop talking to her like that." The woman snapped toward him with a glare sharp enough to slice glass. "Excuse me? This isn't your problem. She's sitting in the wrong place. I'm simply trying to fix it." The man didn't flinch. "The seat numbers are printed right there. She's where she belongs. You're not." The woman looked as if she had swallowed something sour. Her hand went to her hip, and she stepped further into the row, making the space feel claustrophobic. "Listen," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I'm trying to sit with my husband. This little girl will live if she swaps seats. She's being dramatic." Kathy wanted to respond, to defend herself, but the words dissolved on her tongue. The embarrassment, the fear, the pressure of the moment, it all pulsed inside her like a second heartbeat. She couldn't understand how something so simple could turn so humiliating. The man, however, did not let the moment pass. He shifted his body slightly, subtly forming a barrier between Kathy and the woman. She told you she's anxious about flying. She doesn't have to justify her seat to you. The woman scoffed loudly, drawing even more attention. This is ridiculous. I'll get a flight attendant. They'll sort this out. She reached for the call button, but didn't press it, opting instead to raise her voice even more. Unbelievable behavior. I'm just trying to sit with my family. A flight attendant briskly approached, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her eyes moved between Kathy's trembling posture, the man's steady gaze, and the orange-clad woman practically vibrating with indignation. Is there an issue here? Yes, the woman declared, gesturing wildly. She took my seat. And he, she pointed accusingly at the man, decided to get involved and harass me for no reason. The attendant frowned slightly. Looking down at the ticket, the woman thrust forward. She followed the numbers with her eyes, then compared them to the seat markings. Ma'am, your seat is 17C. This row belongs to them. The woman blinked, momentarily thrown, then quickly recovered with a scoff. Well, clearly the system messed up. I want this window seat. The attendant maintained a firm, polite tone. I'm afraid that's not possible. Please make your way to your assigned seat so we can continue boarding. The woman's jaw tightened. I'll fix it myself, she muttered, stepping back into the aisle but refusing to move away completely. She hovered there, arms crossed, eyes burning with silent fury, making it clear the issue was far from resolved. Kathy exhaled shakily, feeling a brief wave of relief, but the tension in the air didn't fade. The woman lingered nearby, and each second she remained added another layer of unease. Kathy glanced at the man beside her. He offered her a small, reassuring nod, the kind that told her he wasn't going anywhere. The plane continued boarding around them, but the atmosphere in their row remained suspended, as though waiting for something to snap, shift, or break open. And as the woman's glare stayed locked on them, it was clear the moment of relief was only temporary. Something worse was coming. The aisle around them slowly returned to motion, but the tension clinging to the row didn't loosen. Mia remained planted a few steps away, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her bright orange outfit making her impossible to ignore. She stared at William and Kathy with a simmering hostility that pulsed like static in the air. Every few seconds, she shifted her weight, tapping one foot impatiently, clearly unwilling to let the matter go. Her presence alone kept the atmosphere taut, as if the narrow cabin itself were bracing for her next move. Kathy tried to calm her breathing again, but the nearness of the threat made the rhythm falter. She felt William's steady presence beside her, but even that couldn't fully quiet the dread curling in her stomach. The engines outside whirred, the faint mechanical vibrations running through the floor like a warning. She swallowed anxiously, her fingers twisting in the strap of her backpack, wishing she could fast forward to the moment the plane was already in the sky and Mia was far, far away. But Mia was not going anywhere. In fact, she stepped closer. "You two think you're pretty clever," she muttered, her voice low but venomous enough to cut. "But you don't get to decide where I sit. I have every right to be here." William lifted his gaze to meet hers, unflinching. "Your seat is in row 17. Go sit in it." Mia's lips curled as though she had bitten into something rancid. "You don't order me around." "I'm not trying to. I just want you to follow the rules like everyone else." She scoffed loudly, drawing a glance from a passenger passing by. "You think you're so calm and noble, but you don't get to overrule me." "I'm not overruling anyone," William replied evenly. The flight attendant already handled it. Mia's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping further. "This isn't over." She turned sharply, blocking the aisle so aggressively that the next group of passengers nearly collided with her. When one of them politely asked her to move, she responded with a theatrical sigh and a muttered complaint that echoed just loudly enough for nearby ears. Her tone framed her as the victim in some imagined injustice, an oppressed soul struggling against the incompetence of the world. Kathy sank slightly in her seat, heart thudding. "I'm sorry," she whispered to William. "I didn't expect all of this." You didn't do anything wrong, William answered. She would have snapped at whoever sat here. But I made it worse, Kathy said, voice trembling. I froze. I could barely talk. You were scared, William said. That's normal. Fear doesn't make you responsible for someone else's bad behavior. The simplicity of his reassurance allowed a small breath of relief to pass through her, but the tension never fully left. Mia's angry gestures in the aisle, her raised voice, her dramatic retelling of events to anyone unlucky enough to pass. Everything contributed to the sense that something volatile was building. A flight attendant returned again, sternness replacing the earlier polite professionalism. Ma'am, she said firmly, you're blocking the aisle. We need you seated so we can finish boarding. I will sit, Mia snapped, when I get the seat I paid for. You paid for 17C, the attendant corrected. Please take it now. Mia opened her mouth, then closed it again, briefly cornered. But instead of complying, she flicked her gaze back toward Kathy. Look at her, she said loudly. Crying, shaking, honestly. She shouldn't even be flying if she can't handle basic situations. The word struck like a slap. Kathy's throat tightened and her eyes burned. She tried to look away, but humiliation anchored her in place. William's patience finally thinned. That's enough. Mia's eyebrows archly lifted. I wasn't talking to you. Doesn't matter, he replied. You're talking loud enough for everyone. Mia huffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. But something else happened at that moment. Something subtle yet crucial. A passenger seated in the row behind them, a man in his 20s, slowly lifted his phone and began recording. The red reflection of the record indicator glowed faintly on the seatback. He wasn't the only one. Others, who had heard pieces of the confrontation or witnessed Mia's refusal to move, were beginning to realize that this was the kind of behavior worth documenting. William caught the recording passenger's eye for just a moment. A slight understanding passed between them. Mia didn't notice. She continued her tirade, growing more animated as she tried to rally sympathy from strangers. People these days, she complained, gesturing with sweeping motions. It's like they forget how to have basic manners. I'm traveling with my husband, and this girl thinks her anxiety is more important than my family. It's outrageous. William saw the crack in her logic immediately. Her story wasn't consistent. She was too angry to remember what lies she had already thrown around. He spoke calmly, almost conversationally. So, earlier, you said she stole your assigned seat. Then you said she refused your polite request to switch. Now you're saying the airline messed up and you were supposed to be here. Mia turned toward him sharply. What are you implying? I'm asking which version is true. Her eyes burned with indignation. All of them. That's not possible. It is if the airline is incompetent, she snapped. The passenger recording behind them tried not to laugh. William leaned back slightly, keeping his tone careful, not mocking, but measured, analyzing, peeling back layers without appearing aggressive. And now you're saying her anxiety isn't real, but you also claim she's causing a scene. Yet you're the one refusing to sit down. Mia pointed a finger at him. Don't twist things. I'm only repeating what you've said. Her jaw tightened. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her features. Kathy watched all of it in silence. She didn't trust her voice not to break. But she noticed that William wasn't just confronting Mia. He was strategically guiding her into exposing herself. Every contradiction, she blurted, gave more clarity to the people watching. Every raised volume, every exaggerated claim, every shift in her narrative revealed who she truly was. And Mia had no idea. Another attendant approached, accompanied by a uniformed ground supervisor. The boarding delay had escalated the situation beyond routine irritation. Mia saw them coming and straightened triumphantly, as though reinforcements had arrived on her behalf. Finally, she announced loudly, "Someone competent." The supervisor spoke with a calm gravity that instantly shifted the energy in the immediate rows. "We've been informed of a passenger refusing to take their assigned seat." "That's her," Mia said, pointing decisively at Kathy. "And him," she added, thrusting her finger toward William. "They're harassing me." A hush fell over the surrounding passengers. The supervisor turned to William. Is that accurate? William didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. The passengers recording the incident began raising their hands, offering their phones without being prompted. One woman spoke softly from across the aisle. We have video. The supervisor accepted the nearest phone. Mia's smug expression flickered as she watched silent footage of herself yelling, contradicting her own statements, taunting Kathy, and refusing direct instructions. Her face paled. That video is taken out of context, she said quickly. They're lying. There. The supervisor held up a hand, cutting her off. We need a moment to review this completely. The surrounding passengers waited, breath held, anticipation thickening like a storm about to break. Kathy's pulse thudded in her ears. William remained steady, eyes fixed on Mia with quiet expectation. The supervisor reviewed the last clip, then slowly looked up. Mia swallowed. The supervisor took a measured breath. We'll need to discuss your behavior further. Mia's eyes widened, panic beginning to replace her earlier bravado. The supervisor took a step closer. Ma'am, gather your belongings. Mia didn't move. Her fingers curled around the edge of a headrest, as though anchoring herself to the plane through sheer stubbornness. The supervisor's instruction hovered in the air, sharp and undeniable, yet she clung to denial like it might bend reality to her will. Passengers nearby watched with a mix of anticipation and disbelief, their phones lowered but ready. The hum of the cabin softened, becoming a tense background drone beneath the building confrontation. I'm not going anywhere, Mia said, her voice trembling between outrage and fear. You don't understand. They provoked me. They created this whole situation to make me look bad. The supervisor folded his hands calmly in front of him. His voice remained even, but there was no mistaking the finality beneath it. Ma'am, multiple passengers have provided recordings of the incident, and your behavior meets the criteria for removal. You were instructed to sit in your assigned seat, and you refused. You impeded boarding. You raised your voice repeatedly. They're lying, she said, her voice cracking on the last word. All of them. You're taking their side because, she glanced desperately around, searching for support, but found only the weight of dozens of witnesses who had watched her spiral in real time. No one offered a nod or sympathetic gesture. No one defended her version of events. Her husband, sitting 2 rows back, finally stood up halfway, his face flushed with embarrassment rather than anger. He lifted a hand weakly. Mia, maybe we should just... Don't you start, she snapped at him, her fury instinctively latching onto the nearest target. You weren't here. You didn't see how they treated me. Her husband sank back down, defeated. The supervisor took another step forward. Ma'am, if you don't gather your belongings, security will escort you off the aircraft. This is your last opportunity to comply voluntarily. Mia's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted from William to Kathy, then to the strangers around them. She pointed a shaking finger at Kathy. This is your fault. You did this. You couldn't just move one seat. You ruined everything. Kathy flinched, but didn't look away. William subtly shifted his posture, placing part of his shoulder between them. You ruined this yourself, he said quietly, his tone neither taunting nor triumphant, simply true. You kept pushing, and you didn't stop when you should have. The supervisor nodded. Please, ma'am. For a moment, it seemed Mia might refuse again. Her jaw clenched, and the flicker of defiance that had fueled her earlier tirade sparked briefly. But the reality closing in around her, authoritative, immovable, and witnessed by a cabin full of people, finally crushed that last ember of resistance. She snatched her bag from the floor with a jerking motion. Fine, she hissed. I'll leave. But I'm filing a complaint. All of you will regret treating me like this. No one responded. Security officers appeared at the entrance to the cabin just as Mia stepped into the aisle, her movements stiff and resentful. The supervisor gestured for them to escort her, and together they guided her toward the exit. Mia paused long enough to throw one final glare at Kathy, her face twisted with resentment. You're pathetic, she spat softly. You and your stupid fear. Kathy stiffened, but before she could react, William's calm voice cut through the last remnants of her insult. "Walk away," he said. "You've done enough." Mia's eyes flashed, but she obeyed the direction of the officers and disappeared through the jet bridge. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud that felt like the cabin itself exhaling. A murmur of relief swept across the rows. Tension that had stretched thin for far too long finally loosened, replaced by the soft rustle of passengers settling back into their seats. The flight attendants moved with renewed efficiency, confirming that boarding could now continue. Kathy released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands trembled with leftover adrenaline, but the crushing weight that had held her chest captive began to ease. She looked over at William, who sat back down with the simple composure of someone who didn't need praise to feel justified. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was fragile, like glass that had been cracked but not shattered. "I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here." William offered a small, reassuring half-smile. "You don't need to thank me." She crossed a line. Someone had to stop her. Kathy shook her head lightly. "Still, you stood up for me when I couldn't even get a sentence out." "That's what people should do," he said. "Look out for each other." A flight attendant approached, her expression softer now that the storm had passed. "Are you two all right?" she asked. "We're okay," William replied. Kathy nodded, wiping at her eyes discreetly. "Good," the attendant said. "We appreciate your patience. And your help." Her eyes lingered on William with genuine gratitude before she moved on to finish her checks. As takeoff preparation resumed, the cabin gradually returned to a functional rhythm. Overhead bins closed. Seat belts clicked. Safety instructions echoed from the speakers. Kathy leaned back and tried to steady herself as the plane taxied. Her heart still stuttered at each jolt of the aircraft's wheels, but she felt less alone now. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer swallowed her whole. William noticed her tense grip on the armrest. "First flight?" he asked gently. She nodded. "First time on a plane. First time having a panic attack in front of 50 people. First time getting yelled at by a stranger in orange." His chuckle was soft, grounding. "Well, at least you got the worst-case scenario out of the way early. Most flights are way smoother than that." She managed a small smile. "I really hope so. When we take off," he added, "I'll explain the sounds and motions if it helps. Sometimes knowing what to expect makes it easier." Her expression softened with relief. "That would help a lot. Thank you." As the plane aligned with the runway, Kathy straightened, terrified but determined. The engines roared louder, vibrating through the floor. She squeezed the armrest until her knuckles went white, but she kept reminding herself she was safe. Tonight's ordeal had already shown her that even when fear pinned her down, there were people willing to stand up. The moment the plane left the ground, Kathy's breath caught, but William spoke quietly beside her, naming each sensation as it came. She listened. She steadied. She began to understand the rhythm of flight. Minutes later, they reached a smooth cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and a calmer wave flowed through the cabin. Kathy eased her grip, realizing she was still alive, still intact, still capable of breathing without gasping. She looked out the window, something she could never have imagined doing earlier, and saw the clouds drifting like white islands beneath them. For the first time, she felt a spark of awe pushing aside her fear. William glanced over. "Better." She nodded. "Better than I thought I could be." A quiet moment passed between them before a voice from behind said, "Hey man, you handled that like a pro." The recording passenger leaned forward slightly. "The whole plane owes you a drink." William shrugged modestly. Anyone would have done the same. But Kathy knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have intervened. Not everyone would have stayed steady through Mia's storm. Not everyone would have turned the tide simply by refusing to let cruelty stand. The rest of the flight stretched ahead, peaceful, quiet, and open to possibility. Yet an undertone remained, a thread hinting that this journey wasn't finished shaping the people aboard it. And as Kathy watched the clouds drift by, she sensed that the story unfolding between them was only just beginning. As the plane descended toward its destination, Kathy found herself feeling something she never expected to feel on her first flight: pride. Not that the fear had vanished completely, but because she had faced it, and because someone had stood beside her when she couldn't stand alone. When the wheels touched down and the passengers began gathering their belongings, she turned to William with a grateful smile. He nodded back, as if to say she didn't owe him a thing, but she held that moment close anyway. Some strangers pass through your life without leaving a trace. Others step in at exactly the right moment and change everything. And as the cabin lights brightened and the overhead bins opened, Kathy knew that this flight, chaotic, terrifying, unforgettable, had become a story she would carry with her for the rest of her life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe for more cinematic, dramatic stories just like this one. Your support helps bring more powerful moments to life.